Speaking of freelance, thank you so much. Got it. Got it. Speaking of freelance journeys, someone that I was really blessed to meet during my freelance journey when I first started out, especially with A2 Collective, was Pamela. Pamela was someone that I got to connect with about contracts, specifically what we're going to be talking about today. I was definitely in a place where I was using, I think, like ANCO contracts when they were still a thing. And as we grew, we needed to have more thoughtful considerations inside of our agreements. And Pamela, something I really appreciated about working with her was that she was able to bring such a thoughtfulness to contract work. A lot of contract work can feel like it has to be super hard and strict and has to come in with very authoritative language. But that's just not the flow of A2. And so I was really grateful that she was able to map our brand's tone to things that were legally feasible. So just thank you for that. I'm so grateful that y'all get to meet her tonight. Just to let you know, we will have other classes and other classes specifically in legal. So today is going to be contract focused. We'll have another one in February that'll be focused on IP and intellectual property. And then we'll have a last one about client ghosting. So what actually happens when that takes place and what are your rights around that? So if you enjoyed this one, if you have an interest in some other ones, please sign up. We'll also have some more workshops around professional development that you should look forward to. And also, it's really important for us to mention this, that we're at a really beginning phase of what this will look like. And so our focus is that you get the most out of this. We're not concerned with how many squares are in the screen right now. We're concerned with how you take away the information. And so with that said, at the end of this session, we're going to send everybody a link for feedback. We'd really appreciate as much feedback as you can. Please don't hold back. Whatever it is, if there's something even that we don't ask in the survey that comes up, please let us know. We want to do this well. We understand we are doing God's work, y'all. So we got to make sure we put in our best foot. And last but not least, the first 5 people that signed up for Pamela's courses actually will get a free 15-minute consultation with Pamela. Y'all, this is a really big deal because a lot of times we're not able to get into the details of everyone's situation. And so inside this, while it's not going to be a hard-on like legal advice session, it will give you some time to explain a little bit better about what you're looking for in terms of legal advice. And Pamela will be able to assist you a bit further into what her services can be, okay? So with that, I'm clean. 7:05, I will go ahead and turn it over to Pamela. Thank you so much for being here, y'all.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us in this evening. Maybe you're not in the evening hours, but I am. But thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen now. I have a little presentation for y'all. Just keeps me on track. Okay, I think everyone can see that. So we do have a Q&A section towards the end that I left time for, but just in an effort to not forget your questions, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat whenever you think of them as I'm going through, some of these slides, and I will get to them at the end, I promise. I'm a little interactive though, so if like you have a very pressing question that has to do with something I'm talking about, I'm fine with that too. So it's a nice little group here, so it can be an intimate night for us, and we can just kiki on all things contract. Okay, so welcome again, like I said, let me move my screen so I can see you guys straight. Okay, great. To freelancer contracts and mistakes to avoid. As you all know, my name is Pamela Rosario. Super happy to be here. Thank you to Audrey and the entire A2 team for having me and for helping coordinate all of this. Hold on, guys. Sorry, I just did something to my screens and I don't know what I did. Okay, perfect. I just want to make sure I see all of you guys just in case. All right, so really quickly about me, I am an attorney for creatives and entrepreneurs, working with them on contracts and intellectual property rights. My goal is really just to make the legal stuff less scary. I think Audrey alluded to that, depending on the ethos that you have as a company, as a business, as a freelancer, so that you can do what you do best, which is, move forward in your creative pursuits. I wouldn't be an attorney if I didn't come with some terms and conditions. So just a quick disclaimer. I am an attorney. I am not your attorney unless we sign, an agreement together, an attorney-client relationship is formed. This is all for informational and educational purposes only, and so none of it should be considered specific legal advice. All right, now that we got that out of the way. So I like to give a little lay of the land, a quick rundown of what we'll be chatting about today. So I want to, of course, highlight the overall importance of having contracts in the first place, why they're important. And then I want to list for you some key elements that should be included in these contracts. And they go really hand in hand with some of the common contract mistakes that I see freelancers make or that I find in these contracts. And then, of course, like I mentioned, the Q&A. All right, so shall we begin? So why are contracts important? Why do we even need contracts? It may seem like, an obvious answer or question, but I do want to highlight some specific reasons so that you understand kind of, the background of all of this. So one, contracts protect both the client and the service provider. It really just spells out the details of the relationship. You really don't want an agreement that protects just one party, even though that sounds like it's a good thing. The best and most fair contracts are ones where both parties are protected, both parties understand what they're getting into, so to speak. And just in the event that one party doesn't do what they say they're going to do, whether that's payment or performing their duties. So protections for both sides. Next, you want contracts because you want to set these clear expectations and boundaries and really just the overall responsibilities. You want everyone on the same page. Everyone should understand what they're required to do under the agreement. That way, if things go south, unfortunately, you can look back to the language and say, hey, this is what we agreed to. So protections and just clear expectations and boundaries. And then last but not least, in that same vein, when things do go wrong, a contract gives you a recourse, a remedy, if you need it. If someone doesn't pay, if someone doesn't deliver on work. One thing I will point out here is that I think sometimes people look at contracts a little bit differently. Contracts are not a magic wand. You can't go to someone and it's not going to force someone to physically do the thing that they said that they were going to do, right? And I know that sounds weird because you're like, then why am I signing an agreement? But under the law, you have things that you can do. A contract, what it does is it gives you remedies. It gives you solutions to some of these issues. But you do have to take extra steps to enforce it. So it protects you on the back end for the protection piece. And then the enforcement is kind of a second step that comes, again, when someone doesn't do what they say they're going to do. So that's why we need contracts, really quickly. Let's move into what we need to include in contracts, some of the overall, key elements. What I want to highlight today are scope of work, payments, ownership, and termination. There are more, of course. You've seen contracts that are 20 pages with 80 sections. Unfortunately, hopefully you haven't, but they're out there. But these are just the key provisions that really make a difference between what I think are, good enforceable contracts and ones that are not. Having these sections and having them be really, really clear. So let's go over them and we'll go over kind of what should be included in each one. Scope of work. You want a very detailed description of the services that you will provide. Here, what we're doing, like I mentioned, is we're defining the relationship. Party X is providing web design services to party Y to be performed in the next 3 months, where each month a specific deliverable is due, for example. You also want to list what's not included, which is really important because you don't want clients asking for additional services that you were not planning on giving, right? That are outside of the scope of what you guys originally agreed to. So if they want those additional services, you want to make it clear that it's outside of the scope because you want to be properly compensated. So that's the scope of work. It's really just detailing what is it that we are entering this contract into for. Oh, Lord, I knew I was going to do that. Hit the wrong button. Sorry, guys. Okay, so scope, we got that. Next, Payment terms, fees, payment terms, that's the what really of the relationship. Make sure you include your fees, of course, and in what ways you're going to be paid. And that's where the invoice schedule, the timing, that's the when. How often will you be paid throughout the relationship? And we'll talk a little bit about that later, why that's important and, kind of what order. The method, how do you prefer to be paid? Maybe you do like checks, maybe you like electronic transfers, maybe you use PayPal for business. So what contracts can do is allow you to create these internal processes as a company, as a freelancer, because you get to dictate the terms of this what, when, and where. And I know Audrey and I have talked about that a lot. You'll have clients that ask, can I do things this way? Can I do things this other way? And you obviously want to be flexible with your clients, but you also want to maintain your own internal processes, right? This is the way that we do things. This is the way that we receive payments. These are our payment terms. We get paid 15 days after an invoice, 30 days, whatever it is, the contract language kind of coincides with those internal policies that you are creating for your company. It's not really efficient to have them be so different for all clients because it's just really hard to keep track of. And then lastly, in this section, we want to list the remedies in the event that payment isn't made or isn't made on time. Are you okay with late fees? Do they have an opportunity to pay late after a certain amount of time without the agreement automatically terminating? I have some clients that have, you're late on a payment, we have the right to terminate the agreement. It doesn't say we will terminate the agreement, but we may terminate the agreement. Words matter in that instance. So it just depends on your ethos as a company. I have a client who they have late fees, but the amount of the late fees is donated to like a charity of their choice. So it's a deterrent. The other side still has to pay late fees, and so it makes it so that they don't want to pay late. But this company is not necessarily trying to make money off of these late fees. They want to pay it forward in some way, and that's part of their ethos as a company. So you can get very creative, within the bounds of the law, but you can get very creative with your contracts depending on how you want to run your business. Next up, so sorry. Okay. Next up, ownership. So as a creative freelancer, you are likely creating some type of work for a client, right? So the important thing about the ownership section is detailing who owns the work and what rights are granted. It is not always the case that a client should own the work, just like it's not always the case that the service provider should own it. It really just depends on what the parties negotiate and what the fees are. So it's important to list who will own the work, but also what kinds of rights, if any, the owner is giving others, meaning the other side. So you can own the work, but you can also give your client a license to it, with certain permitted uses. For example, a photographer may want to retain a license to the work, ownership, excuse me. A photographer may want to retain ownership of the images and then license out some kind of use to their client. Maybe they say you can use it for 1 year and you can only use it digitally, but not in print. So just an example, again, this can look so many ways. It really just depends on what you are agreed to and what you charge. I always say, your fees should be as the rights that you're giving, as the usage that you're giving increases, so too should your fees. And then last key section here, termination clause. Essentially an out clause, the conditions for how you end the contract. Every contract needs an out clause, and it's not because we want people to be able to terminate whenever. It's because we want to financially protect ourselves in the event that termination takes place and we want to get paid for the work that we've done. This stuff happens, right? Projects end, unforeseen events happen. Hello, the pandemic. And sometimes contracts need to be terminated. But as the service provider, you want to make sure that any termination clause that you have in your contract includes provisions that says If this agreement is terminated for whatever reasons, you can list the reasons, you will get paid for all services rendered up until termination. What does that mean? All of the work that you've done until the day that your client says, I want to terminate, you should and must really get paid for that. If that's not clearly spelled out in the agreement, it'll be really, really hard to receive, collect that payment. So now that we know why contracts are important and what needs to be in them, I wanted to talk about some common mistakes that we want to avoid when drafting agreements in the negotiation phase. Of course, all things being equal, you guys will have an attorney that will work with you and draft this for you, but we know that that is not always the case, right? Um, if you are working with an agreement, maybe you're reviewing it that someone has handed you, or you have something that you're currently working with that you've been, tweaking here and there. I just want you to at least understand these mistakes so that if you see them in an agreement, you're able to point it out, maybe make some tweaks. And like I said, as you'll see in a bit, they really coincide with a lot of the elements that we just chatted about. So mistake number one, you guys are gonna kill me. I'm so sorry. I keep going ahead. Okay. Mistake number one, not asking your clients to sign a contract. So I know I sound like a broken record, but every project, every relationship should have a contract signed by both parties. Let's all promise right here that we're going to make 2024 the year of no handshake deals. Handshake deals do not benefit anyone, not you, not your client. So let's just throw those out the window, right? If there's an issue, if there is a question, if there is any confusion regarding these services or payments or ownership, all of the things that we've been talking about, you have nothing to look to if you don't have a contract, right? You have nothing to protect you. Contracts are like insurance. I say it a lot. People typically only worry about them when something has gone wrong, and that's when they kick in and protect you. We don't like insurance, right? Insurance is a scam. But if you, God forbid, hurt yourself, if you have a medical, those are the instances where insurance, we're really glad to have it if we are privileged enough to have insurance. That is what a contract is. It might be an investment in the beginning, but if something goes wrong, you're going to be very, very happy that you have that contract to protect you. So no more handshake deals ever. Mistake number two. So having unclear or vague scope of work language. Like I mentioned earlier, you need to clearly detail what the services are that you're going to provide or won't provide to avoid this confusion that we've been talking about. What's included, what's not, what's extra, at what rate, right? If something is outside of the scope, you could say anything outside of the scope, anything additional will be charged at my hourly rate of X. What we're trying to avoid here really is something called scope creep. I'm sure you've heard of it, maybe you haven't, but scope creep means when the scope of a project slowly and subtly grows over time into something that's way beyond what you originally agreed upon. It happens bit by bit over time without any changes to the contract, no amendments. You just kind of continue business as usual, and the thing starts to balloon up. And it really happens because the agreement doesn't have this language that says this is extra or additional work will be charged at, X rate. For example, let's say a freelance web designer agrees to design a website for $100 for the sake of this example, but your agreement is a little bit vague on what website design entails. It just says website design, right? So it doesn't say what it includes. There's not a list of deliverables. So as the project goes on, the client adds little requests here and there. Can we add this to the contact page? Can we increase the photo gallery? Can we add, 10 more pages instead of the original 5 that we talked about in the consultation? Maybe clients think, genuinely that these are tasks that are included in website design. It doesn't have to be anything malicious. And these asks on their own may not seem huge, but they add work hours for you. Every second, every minute counts. So eventually, like I said, this project will balloon into something huge that might require 5 times more work or 10 times more work from you than you originally thought, or that you originally even planned for. It's like death by a thousand little paper cuts, where all of those little out of scope additions will pile up over time. And what that does is it forces freelancers to do way more work than you planned for less money. And we're not doing that in 2024 either. So clear language is really key to preventing the scope from expanding into something crazy. And I know that sometimes conversations about money can be awkward with clients. Audrey and I have talked about that a lot as well. You kind of have to get your reps in, right? Like there's nothing that a client will hear that should be completely out of the ordinary. You are a business, right? You are a freelancer in your industry, and you should get paid for the work that you do. So if your agreement says XYZ is outside of the scope and this will be charged at the hourly rate, letting them know, hey, per the terms of our agreement, per section 2, you requested these additional services. Here's the updated invoice, or here is a new invoice for those additional services. That doesn't have to be awkward, right? If it's in the agreement, they should already have an understanding about that. And there should be no issues, or really, no questions. But all of that goes back to clear contract language. If you don't have that, then there can be awkward conversations, because the client's going to be like, I didn't know that was extra. I thought that was part of website design, So mistake number 3, not including progress payments. I am not a really big fan of having contracts where the service provider is doing work up front without some kind of payment. It doesn't have to be large, a deposit, a retainer, something. It doesn't have to be payments every week. You can have 50% due up front, 25% due up front, 10, whatever it is that you want. But there should be some skin in the game aside from signing the agreement in the beginning from the client. As you work, aka as you progress through the project, you should be seeing some type of payment coming in. If you start work and then, complete the work and collect full payment at the end of the project, it can sometimes be a recipe for just some not great moments, some awkwardness, like we talked about. So I just never recommend that. And again, it can look however you want it to look. Your progress payments can be, depending on the length of the project, it can be whatever percentages you'd like, but just have something in there. So as you work, you're getting paid to some extent. And it also protects you in the event of a termination, like we talked about. If they do need to terminate, then maybe up until that point, you've already been paid for a lot of the work that you've done, or, the invoice, that remaining invoice is going to be smaller. But if you terminate, you haven't been paid, there's no kind of timeline schedule language, you're going to have to get into the back and forth of, well, I think I've done, 35% of the work, and so I should be paid 35% of what the fees are. And that's just confusing. It's awkward. It makes things just really complicated when it could have just been written in the agreement. Mistake number 4, having unclear or non-existent ownership rights. So this is when the contract does not establish who owns the work and what rights are granted, like we talk about. We want to do this to avoid these potential problems later. And this is actually, it should have been number 1, because it's actually one of the most common mistakes that I see in my work. Contracts that are just silent on ownership rights. They're not included at all. They don't discuss it. So by default, if there is no contract language to govern this, we look to the law, right? If you are having a dispute about a relationship, an agreement, it's not in the agreement, the judge, let's say if this goes to court, is going to look to the law. And copyright law, which is what governs this type of work, states that whoever created the work, meaning whoever clicked the shutter on the camera, put pen to paper for the drawing, whoever created the work is the copyright owner. And so that may sound like it's a good thing for you, right? As a service provider, you're the one who's creating the work, and if the agreement is silent on that, then it's yours. And it's not a bad thing, but we want everyone, we want it to be fair. We want the agreement to be fair on both sides. We don't want to trick clients into ownership. It should just be clear in the contract. Who is going to own this work once we're done? If I, as a service provider, freelancer, will own the work, am I giving you any rights to it? Are you owning the work? Am I assigning the rights to you? Once you pay me that final invoice, I say, okay, this work is 100% yours. It should just be spelled out again so that everyone is on the exact same page. Lastly, mistake number 5, lack of final delivery language. So how the project or relationship is being closed out. Freelancers should really outline very clearly what even is the final delivery of the work product to the clients. Like, what does it mean to finish this project? What is the final step that I'm doing as a freelancer to give you, client, what you paid for completely? We also want to talk about language related to how clients are going to approve this work, again, throughout the project, as it progresses, or at the end. What does final approval look like? Without this, disputes really happen over payment. If, the client claims that the work was not actually completed, they'll be like, well, I thought that final delivery was this. And to you as a freelancer, your final delivery looks like something else. So delivery language should be clear, and both parties should agree in the beginning as to what is it that we think this final work product will look like. It should also include the format for delivery. If you are a photographer and you are handing over images, what's the format for that? In what way? Are you going to do a WeTransfer? Are you going to put it in a Google Drive? How many rounds of revisions your clients have? The point is to make sure that there's no ambiguity around what is a completed, accepted project or deliverable. So, short recap here. We hopefully now know why contracts are crucial for you as a freelancer. We know that we need to ensure that there are these essential elements that are in there, and that is a clear scope of work, clear payment terms, ownership language that everyone understands, and an out clause, making sure that there are termination rights. And then lastly, we know that we will be avoiding some of these common mistakes that I see get some freelancers in trouble, because they can be really costly to you and your business financially, and really just like personally. Okay, so that is it for me for now. I wanted to leave a good amount of time for Q&A, because I know a lot of these sections can not be confusing, but there are some specifics that some people usually have questions on. So I'm happy to answer that now. If anyone has any questions, I'm going to look through the chat.
Are we allowed to just talk and ask our questions?
Yes,
How you
definitely.
doing, Pamela? It's Miss Rashida.
Hi, Rashida.
Hi, darling. I am, first of all, thank you. I appreciate you.
Yes, my pleasure.
Because as you're doing this, I actually have one of my contracts up and I'm just kind of with a red pen.
Yeah, take notes.
I'm like, oh, I need to change that. So here's my question. Do we, um, like for me, I'm a consultant. So do I just have, um, do I need to have different contracts or can I have one standard? Because sometimes I deal with individuals and then sometimes I deal with corporate, bigger corporations, and then sometimes I'm dealing with, smaller businesses. Can they all be the same standard contract, or do I need to have different contracts for the different levels of organizations that I work for?
Great
As
question.
clients?
I actually recommend that you have one agreement, right, for everyone. And then we'll talk about what will change with them. But what you want to do is create consistency again with your internal policies and procedures. And that means your contract language. So you want to make sure that all your agreements with all of your clients say the same thing, so that you don't have to be worrying about, oh, this agreement says that I'm going to be paid in 5 days. This one says in 30. It's a lot of like extra bookkeeping and record keeping for you. Even the protections that you have, like, oh, this one protects, it has late fees and this one doesn't. So I would recommend everyone to have one agreement that has, you know, the first couple of pages is all of the legal mumbo jumbo, right? The scope that, or not the scope, termination, payment, ownership rights, all of that stuff will be in the first couple of pages, you know, depending on how long your agreement is. And then what I recommend at the end, you put the scope of work instead of having it in the body of the agreement, and have it be like a template or a customizable version that you have. So leave a lot of the sections blank. So what I do for my clients is when they ask me, I need a template for my business that I want to use moving forward with all of my clients. We work on the legal language that is in the beginning, and then at the end I create a, you know, fillable scope of work for them so that they can change it whenever they're working with different clients. So it'll just say, you know, Rashida Frazier LLC, let's say that's the name of your company, will provide the following services. I leave that blank so that you can fill that in to whatever it is the services that you're providing. And it doesn't matter if it's to a larger corporation or a smaller corporation. You know, obviously depending on the project, that's going to be longer or shorter, but that's the piece that you want to customize for clients, right? What you're providing, the project timeline. Maybe there's a project that'll take 1 month. Maybe there's a project that'll take 6 months. Those are the pieces that you want to be able to customize. When it comes to the legal language, it's okay, and it should be all the same for all of your clients. You know, there's no reason why you should be more or less protected when you're working with different types of clients. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you.
Okay. Yes. I think there were some questions. Okay. Melissa. Oh, hi, Melissa. If the client provides the contract and doesn't accept all or any of the proposed changes, what should we do? That's a great question as well. Again, this is where, you know, we cue in some of the awkward moments. If you have an attorney, then I always say just blame the attorney. My attorney does not want me to accept this section, make them the bad guy, right? Because you want to eliminate some of that awkwardness with your client. But if you don't, I really, really implore you to think about the consequences of, I'm going to get a little woo-woo, but of betraying your processes and procedures, right? For each client. If we continue to do that, we chip away at this like business that you're building, right? If we are customizing these policies for different clients and doing, you know, different things for different clients, that really, it sucks for you at this like empire that you're trying to build. I would say, you know, very respectfully and very nicely and calmly, this doesn't have to be contentious, but just let them know, like, this is part of our internal processes and procedures. And then internally in your head, think about the things that are actually deal breakers for you, right? There are some things that I would agree. I'm not going to walk away from a client because, you know, they want me to pay them in 35 days and I want to get paid in 30 days. Is that great? No, it's not great. But should I walk away from a client? Probably not. If they have a really good reason, maybe they're a nonprofit and, you know, because of their internal accounting system, they have to pay at the 35-day mark, or it has to go through a lot of levels of approval and they just can't make 30 days work. That's okay, right? That has some reasoning. But you really should remain steadfast in whatever it is that you decide are these internal processes and procedures for your company. And then think about the things that are deal breakers for you, the things that you can bend on a little bit, the things that are not that much of a big deal. Have that internally for you as a business, as a freelancer, as a consultant. Next, Jessica, can you share the difference between a deposit and a retainer fee? You know, I think that these terms are used differently by everyone. You know, to me, a deposit, it's just part of the payment, right? It's whatever percentage you think of the payment you want to make as your deposit. And so is the retainer. Traditionally, what a retainer traditionally means is you're paying an amount and then I'm charging from that amount as I complete the work. So for example, I'll explain how it works in law firms. Traditionally, old school law firms, they say you pay me a, let's say $1,000 retainer, and I'm going to start doing the work for you. That retainer goes into a separate account and I just hold it there. as I'm doing the work, I'm kind of charging that account and I'm taking the money. A lot of people, again, use these terms interchangeably. It's kind of the same thing. I would steer away from even using the term retainer because it's so confusing and people use it differently. I would say either, this contract is split into 4 payments. Payment 1 is due when we execute this agreement. Payment 2 is due a month later. Payment 3, and so on. If you want to call it a deposit, you can call it a deposit. But sometimes the deposit language causes confusion too, because some clients are like, well, is the deposit refundable? Is it not refundable? Like it gets into the nitty gritty. I would really keep it very simple and say, the fees are X. It's split into 4 payments because this project is going to last 4 months. A payment is due each month, as an easy example. Next question. Samia, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. How far in advance should we alert our clients that our fees are increasing? And do we need to update the original contract with the new fees, or just a simple service fee increase letter and have them sign? Love that question. So again, it actually depends on what's in your agreement. So I'll give you a lawyer example. We have to put that in our retainer letter when we are signing up clients. We have to let them know that if there is a fee increase in the future, you will have 30 days notice, you will have 60 days notice. I won't say that that's a requirement because business plans change, right? Sometimes you need to increase fees. I think the fairest thing is to let them know as soon as possible. I would say 30 days is pretty industry standard. If you want to do longer, if you know well in advance, I think giving clients as much notice as possible is great. But 30 days is pretty standard to let them know, we are increasing our fees. Now, as far as your second question, it depends on what's in your agreement. Like I mentioned, if there's language in your agreement already that says we may have fee increases in the future, then all you have to do is kind of send them either an email notice or a letter. Depending on what the language says, it might say that you're going to provide them notice in writing. You could send a mass email to all your clients. Hi, as of January 1st, 2024, our fees will be increasing per your agreement section 2. It's already laid out there. If you don't have that, then yes, I would send them the same kind of notice, but you're not referencing the agreement. You're just letting them know, FYI, our fees will be increasing. Let us know if you have any questions, all that jazz. Rachel, I've seen some contracts written in the point of view of the client. I understand that there will be a late fee, and other ones written as the client will agree to XYZ or the business. Which point of view do you recommend? So I've thought about this a lot. The first point of view, meaning I and you, I think it makes it more conversational and easier to read. However, sometimes it makes the language confusing because it depends on who drafts it, who's reading it, and then it can say, if you say you agree to something and you're like, wait, but who's you and who am I and who are we? You can define that in the beginning, like you equals the client, I, we, us is the company. I just think it's cleaner and easier for yourself, for your attorney, shameless plug, to have it just be like client equals XYZ, company equals the A2 collective. That way, throughout the document, you just say company does this, client does this, and it's easier. There's no right or wrong way. I will say that. I think it's a contrary to what you may expect. I think it's a little bit easier to read when it's client versus company, but that just could be because I'm a lawyer and I'm brainwashed to think that. Rashida, what do you do when you have a client who constantly scope creeps, but when they have to pay their invoices are always late? Aren't they all? Yeah. So this is where, and we'll talk about this in the other workshop on ghosting and like boundaries. This is when boundaries are super, super important. And boundaries sounds like a therapy term, like a woo term, but you need business boundaries in your business. Like you cannot survive, I think, as a business owner without them, because clients will take advantage. And it's not because they're bad people, right? It's just because maybe it's human nature, maybe it's not clear to them and they think one thing. Everyone has a different point of view. But the best way to remedy that is to be clear about your boundaries, right? I always recommend having clients have like some kind of communication policy or something that they send clients in the beginning, like after they sign the contract. Hey, this is just my welcome guide, right? This is the way that I prefer to communicate. Don't DM me about this project because I'm not going to answer, or it just muddies up everything. This is when you need to pay. These are our holidays, things like that. So when you do have a client that is constantly going against those policies, it's kind of like a contract. You kind of point to something and say, hey, I am not in the business of firing clients, but I have very clear company boundaries, and you have pushed them each and every time. And, this affects not only the project, but my other projects and my other clients. And if I am constantly having to, finagle around your scope creep and you're not paying your invoices, I cannot move forward with working with you anymore. I'm in these attorney groups, and there was this attorney that's sent a message out to the group. She wanted advice, and she was like, I have this great client. It's in the perfect client avatar that I want. It's in the exact industry I want to work with, but they haven't paid me in 6 months. They keep saying they're going to pay. They keep saying they're going to pay. It's a great revenue source. Like, I really want to work with them. And almost every single client was like, that is not a good client. That is not a good revenue source because they are not paying you. And so in our minds, there could be maybe some scarcity mindset stuff, or we don't want to get rid of clients. We don't want clients to feel bad, but they also need to think about you as a business, right? You need to run as a business. You also have bills to pay. You have team members to pay. You have rent to pay, right? If they're not thinking about that, you definitely need to be thinking about that when you're enforcing these policies and procedures. So if they are always late, I would really, really put your foot down kind of there, because it's just not fair, for lack of a better phrase, right? You are continuing to deliver, you are continuing to give your service to an amazing caliber, and they are not paying your invoices when they say that they will, or when you're asking them to. Another question, thoughts on bartering? Yeah, bartering. I'm not against it. I think that there is a time and a place for it, especially in the freelancing community, especially when you're first starting out. Just make sure that it really is an even exchange, right? It's not just about, oh, well, you are providing me this service that equals $500, and so that's kind of equal to whatever it is. I can't think of an example in the moment, but just make sure that it's equal, because what I see happen is uneven exchanges all the time. Someone for some reason is asking for a barter, and maybe they don't have the best intentions. Or maybe it just, again, balloons into something that you didn't originally intend. Like, be very clear on what the barter is and what it is not. Because it's not in the scenario where you're missing payments or you're not getting paid for work that you're doing. You're not getting paid at all, right? And you are doing work. You are putting in some sweat equity on the other end, giving whatever services you agreed to. So not against it at all. Just make sure that it feels good to you when they say, I'm giving you this and you are giving me this. Think about everything that you'll have to do for this barter, and see if it feels good with what you're getting back. All right. Any other questions? Yes, Maya. Yeah, late fees. Again, they can be whatever you want it to be. There are some standard numbers. Some people use a percentage. It's usually 1.5% for every month that it's late. That's industry standard, but it can be anything you want. It shouldn't be anything outlandish, because again, fast forwarding to when things go completely wrong and you have to go to court, no judge is going to say, yes, you charge them $1 million in late fees because they were late 5 days, right? Like, it can be ridiculous, but that's the industry standard, 1.5% for every month that it is late. Yeah, she is not playing.
I actually wanted to lift up a few things that might come up later for people that questions that I've asked you that and the ways that you've helped me respond to them. So one, should I sign a client's contract or should they
Mm-hmm.
sign mine? That comes up a lot, especially working with new clients. And sometimes it can feel like whoever reaches that point first, like dancing in email, and all of a sudden somebody sent a contract. Like, oh, I actually have a contract too, and I was gonna actually decide mine, and now you sent me yours, and now it's uncomfortable. And what you've taught me is, as the service provider, we get to set those parameters. So the client doesn't know how to design a website, or the client doesn't know how to do a photography setup. And so therefore they would not be able to set out the parameters of what that should look like and how that should matriculate into payment terms. So we have that freedom to do that, and we should exercise that. So when receiving a client's contract, going ahead and saying, thank you so much for sending this. Maybe there's like some parameters there we want to consider. Here is the contract, the standard agreement that we work with. That's been really helpful for us. Something I really want to outline in that is the word we. It has helped me so much in my freelance career. When you say we, people understand that it's not just you. And even when it was just me and God, y'all, it was just me, God, and a teddy bear that I had on my bed behind me. It was just us, but it was us. And I always made that clear. Like, it's us, my team and I, we, us, like our, because when you lay those things out, people understand they can't just finagle with just you. And they start to think of you bigger and talk to you better about your business and about your policies. When it's just you one-on-one, they can feel like, oh, hey, would it be okay, Audrey, if we did this? Or Audrey, we know that you do. No, actually, like usually we work with this or we have this, that will help them like, oh, okay, so this affects other people too. And it does. So using we language has been really helpful for me. Also having a stop work, putting delays for something. Sometimes a client might, not necessarily go ghost as in like, we don't know to pay you, but it might go 3 days or 4 days without communication. And those might be crucial days that you were trying to set up something for them, something that needed to get prepared. And then all of a sudden they jump back in your inbox like nothing happened. Like, okay, we still good for tomorrow? Like, wait, I haven't heard from you in a week. I didn't know that you still wanted to do this. And so I think it's been really helpful to have that laid out. Hey, if I don't hear from you all in 3 days, or we don't hear from you in 3 days, we stop work until communication resumes. And also communication, that delay might affect the project that we're working on, just so that they're super clear that when that happens, we're not just like back into the swing of things. Like, we need to talk. There might be some new considerations that might need to take place. That's been really helpful to have too. Also, what state things happening? We had a really interesting question come through. Hey, can we change the contract to the state of California? I'm not in California. What's going on? Why are we moving the contract to California? I don't know California law, So I was really grateful that Pamela was able to say, yeah, like, no, like, let them know that, your lawyer doesn't advise that. And y'all, again, when you let people know that you have a team, like just even saying my lawyer, they, oh, she got representation. Let's get it right. Let's get it right. It changes things. And it again takes that burden off of you to feel like you have to be the one to stand in the front line of this conversation. Really, hey, I'm not a lawyer. Our lawyer, who is definitely our representation, knows these things. Has advised that we do not do that. And then no further questions. Once we said that, like, yeah, no. If I had written back, well, I don't really know, or I don't understand, they were like, well, we think it's in our best interest, they would have moved like that. But because I was able to say, actually, no, we've actually consulted with our legal team, and we advised not to do that, no further questions. So these are some
It
things
changes the conversation. Like,
that,
unfortunately and fortunately, like, obviously it's great for people to have legal representation, but you should be respected regardless, right? I notice it a lot in the influencer space, just to draw a parallel. When they're negotiating these things, the other side is like, no, we need to do this, you have to do this, you have to do that. As soon as I'm looped in, the conversation changes, the tone changes, because they know that I understand what is fair, what is not fair, what is legal, right? And so I always say, like, yes, it's great that I'm coming in to help, but I always say, like, this sucks. Like, you were just going to take advantage of this person because they didn't have, legal representation. So it does change the conversation for better or for worse. And I think the we does that too, Audrey. That's a great point. I said that too, when it was just me. And I'm like, all of us at this firm, the firm says this, and it helps. It definitely helps.
Can I just jump in and say thank you? I know there's two other questions. I just want to say like thanks, Audrey, for bringing those things up regarding like you having power as well. Because there was a situation where I signed a contract. I was doing photography for a client, and they sent me a contract, and it was like if the photographer is late, then there will be a certain fee. And in my mind, I'm like, okay, I get it. Your time is valuable, but it was also like, what about if you're late, you know? So, but I didn't really have the power to like, or not saying I had to have the power, but I guess I didn't have the boldness to like ask, like, well, what happens if the roles are reversed in that case? So yeah, I definitely have to think about wording if that happens again in the future. But yeah,
A
that's
good
something
tip
to
for that,
about.
a good tip for that, if you find language or an agreement that's like very one-sided, I even do this as an attorney, like I make them do the work. I say, let's mutualize this. Can you please mutualize this section? And then have them, if they're going to have a one-sided section that's so blatantly one-sided, the least they can do is, if they accept, but when you ask, mutualize this, is do the work for you. You may not have, obviously, the language for you to be able to mutualize it yourself, but they want to give you a one-sided section, a one-sided contract. Just ask, I put in a comment bubble, please mutualize this. Of course they could say no, but if they say yes, then they'll do the work for you, and hopefully it'll be a section where both sides are protected, or at least both sides have remedies, like you said, late fees in the event that the other person doesn't do what they are supposed to do. So mutualizing language can be pretty powerful in an agreement that you feel is really one-sided. And sometimes what you'll find is they'll be like, forget it, we'll just take it out. You're like, okay. Of course.
No, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Okay. Rachel, I'm a solopreneur is saying we lying. Can someone sue me? They can't sue you. Let's say it's you and God, like who's gonna say no to that? I love that, Audrey. Like it's not what odds are, let me be careful with my language here. Odds are that no one's going to say, who is we? Who do you work for? Show me there, if you feel like it is you and God running your business the way that it is, then it is we, right? I know people attorneys and just regular entrepreneurs that pretend that they are their assistants when answering emails because they feel like they get a different response. They'll sign it, it'll be them because it's just them, they're solopreneurs. And they'll sign it, thank you, assistant to, whoever, because it just gives it a different air. Again, does that kind of suck? Yeah. But if it works, I don't see why not. There's nothing legal or illegal about that, right? That is just the way that you have your internal processes. But they definitely cannot sue you for that. Can you talk about contracts from an online forms services versus working with an actual lawyer? Asking, yes. So I love talking about that. Back in the day, there weren't contract templates available online. Like it just wasn't a thing. Now there are a growing number of attorneys that want to make the law more accessible for people, particularly freelancers, small business owners who can't exactly afford a lawyer from the beginning, or to have someone do things that are, completely custom to them. So I would really ask you to do your research. I can send you some. I have a contract template shop, as do many other attorneys. And what that does is it gives a more accessible option for entrepreneurs to be able to purchase attorney drafted contracts, right? That are customizable. And so it has all of the legal language that you need. You know that it was drafted by an attorney, and you get to customize the end, like I was talking about, the scope of work. But you don't obviously have the benefit of having an attorney draft one from scratch with unlimited revisions and to make it very custom to your business. But it's still a legally sound agreement, which is way better than, piecing together something that you found online off of Google, off of old agreements that you have. I've even seen non-lawyers sell contract templates on Etsy. And that's not the way that you want to go. It's just as bad as having no agreement at all, because these people don't have the legal background. They don't know the pieces that need to go into a contract to make it enforceable. They too are piecing together things that they've, found online. So I think looking for alternatives to get, this access to affordable, but also, professional legal services. It's definitely out there. It's growing every day. Like I said, so many attorneys have these contract templates shops. There are standard agreements like an NDA, which they all pretty much look the same. You don't need a really custom NDA. You can just, use a standardized version. Also, another tip, if you can't afford an attorney, there are also attorneys that offer like paid consultations at a much lower rate than, hiring them for a specific service. But you can go on a paid consultation where they're able to give you actual legal advice. So when the consultation is paid, that's what, kind of elevates it as far as our ethics rules. That's when we can give you legal advice and just say, hey, I can't afford you to review this whole agreement for me or to draft it for me. Can we go over, some of the sections that you think I should have? Or someone gave me this agreement and, let's say there is an instance where you have to sign an agreement that's not yours. Can we go over the sections that I should look out for? Do you see anything that's problematic? There are alternatives. There are other options and they're growing every day. Like I said, there's a lot of younger attorneys that are offering this stuff because we understand that, or we believe that we want to make, access to the law more accessible for people. So I would, do your research. I can share some resources with the team and they can send it out to you guys after contract template jobs, consultations with attorneys. And just one thing I wanted to say about the state, choosing the state in the contract, just want to explain what that even means. So usually in contracts, you'll see two sections that mention a state, the governing law and something called dispute resolution or disputes. So governing law is what state's laws will govern the contract, meaning New York has different contract laws than California does. Maybe New York says that payments can, I don't know, maybe New York says that there are no late fees allowed. That's not true, but just an example. And California says that they are. So it's really important for you to understand which state is going to govern the laws of your agreement. Some of the sections might be unenforceable in California, but enforceable in New York. So typically the rule of thumb is in the state in which your business is located. The same goes with dispute resolution. What that means is if there is a dispute, if someone files a suit against the other person, regardless of the side, whatever the agreement says the dispute resolution state is, that's where you have to go litigate. Meaning if you are a company in Virginia and your client asks you to change the dispute resolution state to California, if you have to sue them, you have to go to California to sue them. Meaning you have to physically go there, hire a California attorney. So I think sometimes a lot of clients make light of it and they're like, oh, this is never going to happen. Like, let's put California. I'm like, that's across the country for you, like, yes, odds are this won't happen, but what if it does? That's going to not only make it extremely difficult for you, you may not even want to sue at that point because the cost of doing that and going after this person for the money that they owe you are going to be much higher than what they owe you. So just a little tidbit there. Yes, show up in courtroom with God. Exactly. Yes, non-lawyers on Etsy. Definitely would love to know where to find contract forms. Yes, not just mine. I don't want to just plug myself. There are so many attorneys, like I said, offering that. And also I'll put it here in the chat. If you're ever looking for an attorney that has a specific, background, or, you want someone that's in your state, depending on the area of law, some attorneys can work with people in any state. Some can only work with clients in the states that they're licensed in. Avo.com is kind of like a Yelp for lawyers. You go on there, you put in your state, you put in the area, the practice area that you need, and they'll give, a bunch of attorneys with reviews that you can, review. They'll say if they offer free consultations or not. So I really recommend that. And then also, ask your networks. If usually word of mouth referrals are the best because you know that someone has worked with this person. When you are looking for an attorney, interview them, ask them questions. You want to make sure that you vibe with them on like a personal level because this is someone that you have to work with, for the inner workings of your business. So don't be afraid to ask them questions about their background. Are they specific to your industry? If you're a photographer, do they work with other photographers often? All of that stuff is important. Unfortunately, there are a lot of attorneys I wouldn't say a lot. There are some attorneys that are out there and they say that they do all areas of law. And it's like, you can't be a jack of all trades and do it well, right? I don't think. You want someone that's specialized in the area of law that you need. I always use the example, if you are having issues with your heart, you would go to a cardiologist and you would not go to a podiatrist, right? You want a specialist, someone who has experience in the thing that you need.
Something I wanted to just highlight, that like I would think is a good takeaway. I hope that y'all agree. But I find that the contract phase with clients or projects in some ways is also another level of like interviewing them. And so like at the end of the day and at the beginning of it, the question is, can we establish trust? Do we trust each other enough to work together? And so I think that as much as we want the project and we want the client, we want the opportunity, I think it's okay to stare in the face, things that are coming up. If they're questioning you about like, well, how late can we be? What kind of question is that? I mean, I would love for you never to be late, right? So if those kind of things are starting to come up, you can start to gain a little bit of a sense of more information about, is this the right fit? And I think that that's okay. That's okay to realize that moment that you have, because remembering contracts still not signed. So we're still working through and outlining what the relationship is going to look like. And if we can't come to agreement about how it's even going to be written, we certainly won't come to that while it's happening, because there's other things happening around it. And so I think that it's good to stare the moment and the opportunity in the eye of actually contracting and negotiating contracts with clients. So I just want us to be strong and be okay with that.
Yes. All money is not good money. And I really, truly, truly believe that if you do have to walk away from a client who's showing red flags, who's problematic, I really believe that that is just making room for the clients that you do want to call in, right? To the real aligned clients that you want in your business, that are going to pay on time, that are going to respect you and respect your work, right? Not second guess the things that you're saying, not micromanage you in any way. We don't want clients like that. And it doesn't mean that we are not grateful. It doesn't mean any of those things. It means that we respect our business and we respect ourselves more than these people that want to push the boundaries on us. So that's a great point.
Well, I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I have so enjoyed this. I really hope that y'all have. Thank y'all so much. I mean, Pamela, thank you so much. Thank you for every bit of a difficult conversation that you've gone through in the past, so that you would have gems to share with us today. We really appreciate it. And I hope that a lot of this has given a lot of us some context as to how we can approach things, even some confidence around the fact that we can approach them. This is our contract, y'all. These are our skills that we're sharing with other people. And so it's okay for us to have ownership about how that happens. So I will be sharing with the people who actually are our first 5 people. I'll be giving them the consultation link that they get to do with Pamela. But no fear, if you were not one of those people, Pamela will be with us again in February and in March, going a bit deeper into some areas. So IP, intellectual property, very relevant topic as copy and paste gets really, really familiar around these days. And so ownership over your ideas. If you have questions in that, if you have friends that have questions in that, please take a look at that. And then our last one for this quarter, it would be client ghosting. So we're talking about like what happens when some of these boundaries are crossed. What does it mean for us like next step wise? So please, y'all, I'm going to send you a survey. Please, I know surveys are a lot. We try to make this, I think it's 5 questions. 5 questions, y'all. Please let us know how this went. We want to do this well. We appreciate what you say. We will be reading them and praying over them. So just thank y'all. Thank y'all so much for being here. Pamela, did you have anything else you want to mention?
Couldn't have said it better. I just want to thank everyone for being so interactive. Your questions were amazing. I had so much fun tonight. It's really, when I do these things, I can really tell who's like really focused and listening, and like you guys had great questions. So I really appreciate it. For me as a presenter, it makes it awesome. So, please reach out with any questions. I'm happy, if you guys, anything that I wasn't clear or you have any questions on the presentations. And yes, come to the next ones. They, like Audrey said, they will be a deeper dive. It'll be a little bit more in depth. I will hope to make them interesting and not super boring, but it's the law, y'all. But thank you so much for joining.
All right, y'all. Have a good
Thank
night.
you. Good night,
Thank
everyone.
you. Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Good night, guys.